When have you seen a spoiled brat finally face the real world? Story 1. I was a school bus driver in the 70s. During the height of our court-ordered busing, I ferried poor kids to the rich side of town and then rich kids to the other way. Lots of entitled brats, but one stands out. Super entitled kid, constantly defying rules. Eventually, I caught him with too many witnesses, attempting to set a bus seat on fire with his lighter. School officials were called. Hearing with officials and rich dad, and he's banned from all buses for the rest of the semester. Dad offers to pay for the damage and quietly accepts the punishment. Then comes the surprise. The next morning when I arrive at 6 a.m. to clean my bus, a regular task every morning, the rich kid and dad are standing there. The dad introduces me to my new personal bus cleaner for the rest of the year. He brings the kid every morning and forces him to wash and clean the floors on my bus before taking him on to his school. By the end of the year, the entitled kid is actually working hard and being friendly. We're getting along pretty well, and I help him out sometimes so that he can get on to school. The kid turned out okay when this was all over. Good move by his dad. We need more parents like this. I work at Dunkin' Donuts and people's kids are absolute monsters. The parents go, "What you want?" and the kids jump around and shout which donuts they want, or they order just 3 donuts and then ask their kids what they want to drink. The only thing the parent controls is a small for the size. Those kids are so entitled because they have no guidance or true limits. But then there are the good kids, the ones who are getting their first donut in weeks because of a special occasion. They're very careful picking out their one, all for them flavor. The parent also usually hands them the money to make them pay, usually hanging $2. And then I also do my best to explain that since they are giving me $2 and the donut is $1.95, yes, they're expensive, we're a franchise in Germany, that they'll get 5 cents back, so they learn to recognize the value of money and how it works. Those kids make my day. Story 2. When I was working at a public library, we had a few local celebrities come in from time to time. Most of them were nice, but one had a real stick up his arse. He would complain about having to stand in line, about late fees, and about everything else. We would just say, "Sorry, those are the rules," or "Thank you for being patient," even though he wasn't. One day, he and I were apparently both having a bad day, and when I told him there was a limit on how many DVDs or video games he could check out at a time, he slammed his hands on the desk and raged. "Do you know who I am?" This is a grown-ass man, mind you. I was a little college student who barely looked old enough to drive. I was sick of his low-key bullying, so I just looked at him and said, "Yes, I do, Mr. X, and the rules still apply to you. Which of these would you like me to put back?" He was stunned. I don't think anyone had ever actually told him that the rules for everyone else did in fact apply to him as well. He was a little nicer after that. Not a lot nicer, but still. Story 3. When my brother was in school, he was horrifically bullied for being autistic. And his bully was the most entitled little crap I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. His father paid for boxing practice, karate lessons, and other martial arts. This made him think that he was the best at anything physical. My brother isn't overly fond of sports and prefers to read in the library. As the typical nerdy kid, he's a prime target for bullies. One day, when the bully had cornered my brother up against a wall, my brother finally decided that he wasn't just going to take it anymore, but he strongly dislikes violence, and thus would not be fighting back. Instead, when the bully tried to punch him, my brother ducked. 3 broken fingers and a trip to the hospital later, the bully's father finds out what had been happening. All his extra classes, training, were cancelled. He had all of his electronics and games sold. If he wanted to have a car, he would have to work for every penny himself. Story 4. Spending $50 on food a day is not normal. A college girl got cut off from her parents, drinking and not going to class, and had to get a job. She put on Facebook about how she's gonna go hungry and needs money. People offered her food and to make her dinner. She said, "That's okay, I just need about $40 to get through the day. I don't like going to the grocery shop." Reminds me of my old college roommate. We were okay friends and we would go out to dinner quite a bit. I worked a lot and had very little time, each of us paying every other time. Her parents paid for everything and would send her $800 checks for St. Patrick's Day, which she would wave in my face. I was working 2 jobs to stay in college. I often heard her verbally abusing her mom on the phone. Finally, one day, their parents cut her off. She started asking me if we could do meal prep together to save money. I had a super hectic schedule, so I was like, sure, that's a great idea. Go to the store, load up the carts, and get to the cashier. Oh, she forgot her credit card. You see where this is going. It's fine, I'll pay, and we'll square up later. It happens a few more times over the next 2 months. It's okay, I write down the amount each time. We're nearing the end of the semester, so I totaled up the grocery spending and let her know how much she owes me. 2 days later, she came back with a list of every time she paid for dinner during the beginning of the semester. If you recall, we took turns paying for dinner. I remind her of this, and she goes, well, do you have it written down? Honestly, I just laughed. I was like, you don't have the money, do you? It was a couple of $100s, and honestly at that point I didn't care. I was making a fair amount of money for a college student, and knew it wouldn't affect me much. What bothered me was how gloomy she was about it, like she'd won. Anyway, last I heard she was dating a 75-year-old dude who wouldn't divorce his wife, but it's okay, he takes care of me. Obviously she meant financially. Good luck with that, dude. Story 5. I used to repair trails for the Forest Service, and I wouldn't call anybody a brat necessarily, but we're all pretty spoiled when it comes to manual labor and sleeping on the ground. On day 1, the bush plane flies the crew out to a grass airstrip about 40 miles east of town. Then you shoulder your pack, grab an axe and a shovel, and start hiking up the canyon, usually in the rain. Until you watch that plane disappear over the ridge, it's hard to imagine what you've signed up for. Hard labor all day, every day. Working, cooking, and camping in the rain that whole first month. No phone, no mail, no roof, and if you forgot something, you'll just have to live without it until the roads open in July. Wolves and mountain lions circle the camp at night. Sometimes bears come for your food. Everybody struggles for the first month. You'd see the kid who'd been the hard guy on his high school football team start to sit through lunch with his head in his hands, just licked. Guys who were in the 1,000-pound club at their gym slumped up against a tree all evening eating peanut butter for dinner because they were too beat to cook. Demanding as the job was, it wasn't really a physical issue. The best workers on the crew were hippie Jesus types with noodle arms who read Marcus Aurelius around the campfire at night. They just took everything as it came because no matter what, it just kept coming. They and the Mormon ranch kids. I don't know how those kids came up, but nothing brought them down. I've worked at a small orchard for the last 10 years, and the hardest working teenagers are always the ones who grew up on a farm. They complain the least and tend to be more stoic. I remember one kid who got stung half a dozen times by yellow jackets in the blueberry fields one day. He came into the shop and was talking about it like he'd stubbed his big toe. Annoying, but no big deal. I asked him if he wanted ice, and he was okay. He was like, meh. He was a nice kid. I've always found that a lot of fatigue and I can't go on isn't solely a matter of physical strength and a lot to do with attitude. I did a bunch of trekking in Bolivia, and it was always the smokers who would be waiting at the top of the ridges for the rest of the group to catch up. Usually quite fit types who had come specifically for hiking. We'd be waiting there, smoking at 4,000 meters or 20 minutes or so each time. Our theory was that we always feel short of breath and crappy, so when they started hiking at altitude and felt the same thing, they really weren't accustomed to it and had to stop and rest a lot. We felt like that every damn day, up a flight of stairs, so just keep going as normal. Not sure how scientific it was, but the guide said it was almost always the smokers that led the way in their groups. I don't smoke anymore and feel a lot better, and I'm betting that same theory doesn't work below 3,000 meters either. I have a lot of respect for trail crews. I worked for the US Forest Service for 2 summers in my 20s on an animal survey crew. We were comparably spoiled. We were GS5s and GS7s and got paid well. Especially when you add on per diem, and our work consisted mostly of looking for our specific survey animals and taking measurements of water bodies. It was a lot of hiking and spending time in the elements, and mosquitoes, but otherwise nothing compared with trail crews. I was always amazed at the stone trail improvements throughout the wilderness area. Every step at some level was a work of art. We rarely ran into trail crews, but when we did, we were always impressed. Story 6. One of my favorite things about the military is that in a uniform, nobody can tell how privileged or unprivileged you might have been. It's a total blank slate, and for many it's humbling to not get to have or wear your social status on your sleeve. On my second ship, there was an E2 who grew up very wealthy and was an ass about it. He wasn't afraid to let us know. He thought that he was better than his peers. There's a stereotype of the enlisted guy who thinks of himself as an officer, as a way to pretend that means nothing. That's this guy in every way, and he would try to get out of crap enlisted work because he was going to be an officer, probably even a commanding officer of a ship. So there we were, a few hours into his first deployment, and this idiot gets violently seasick. It lasted for days. I don't know if you've ever been around someone who can't open their eyes without yakking, but it's awful. You really feel bad for them. It's hard to watch someone go through it. Not with this guy. I went on my first fishing charter in Florida about a month ago. I've been fine on boats my whole life, getting seasick hadn't even crossed my mind. Pretty much as soon as we anchored, I started puking. I was one of those guys that couldn't open my eyes without puking. It sucked. It legit felt like being tortured for 3 hours. I didn't feel right for a couple of days after that. Story 7. A kid in college was a roommate of a friend of mine. He was always bratty and spoiled, but hung out with us as if he were a good friend, and we let him chill with us because sometimes he wasn't bad. Then one day we heard him arguing with his mom on the phone that he needed more money. From the ensuing argument, we learned that he had in less than 1 year burned through 30 grand that his parents lent him for food and discretionary spending. Mind you, he was not paying for tuition, lodging, or his car with this money. It was basically just food money, as all those other things were also already covered by his parents. He was calling his mother some really nasty things and hung up on her. Then his father called and they got into an argument, cussing each other out. At the end of that call, he threw his iPhone at the wall and shattered it. This was the original iPhone. Turns out they cut him off, and basically he had to drop out of school and drive back home, out of state, because he couldn't afford to do anything anymore, and of course was too good to work a plebes job. He added me on Facebook about a year later, and was a late-blooming 9/11 truther. Obama was president by this time, and the only thing I ever said to him on Facebook was a simple reply correcting one fact he was wrong about in his 9/11 conspiracy theory. He then posted like 4 replies in quick succession telling me to open my eyes, and then blocked me. That's why parents need to teach their kids the value of money, make them work for stuff. When I was young, I didn't get any freebies except birthdays and Christmas. In middle school, I got to help my dad build a shed working at $5 an hour so that I could get a GameCube. Experiences like that quickly teach you not to waste cash. Story 8. Simple and pure example for my part. There was only one coffee shop on my campus, operating out of the library building, and it was always crowded. You learned pretty quickly that if you want coffee before class, you got there 20 minutes early, grabbed a newspaper, I'm old, sue me, and took your time. It was always funny watching incoming freshmen crowd the line 5 minutes before 8 a.m. and slowly filter out in despair as they realized there was absolutely no way they were reaching that sweet Sumatra nirvana in time. Cue this little freshman girl dressed in the classic campus t-shirt, jean shorts, blonde ponytail coming out the back of a ball cap, starter pack. Walking up, assessing the line stretching out the door, and boldly deciding to just sorta skip it. Now, the baristas were usually pretty cool with people skipping for simple things, dropping down a quarter for some Scantrons or $1 for a cookie, anything that didn't require interaction. Not this girl, she caught the barista's attention, while the previous customer was still paying, and went, "Hi, yeah, can I get a latte please, like, really quickly?" The line starts back there," replied the now slightly confused girl behind the counter. "But I have class," whined the freshman. There was an awkward pause before the barista responded. "You're in college. On campus. Are you freaking serious? Why do you think all these people are here? Back of the line." "Oh," was the only thing the freshman girl thought to say as she turned to look at the line full of people staring daggers at her. She looked not upset or embarrassed, but sort of enraptured by this newfound understanding that she's just been imparted. It's like for the first time in her entire life she realized that other people were in her way for reasons. It was actually kind of beautiful to watch, like a baby deer learning to walk for the first time. Better late than never. Reminds me of a guy I had an interaction with years ago. We're on the subway, morning commute time, packed car, gets in with a bike that hits a kid in a stroller. There's a policy against bikes in crowded cars. They can block the exit in an emergency, so people start giving him crap. Well, what am I supposed to do? I have to get to work. Wait for another train. But I have to get to work. I don't care. You don't care that I have to get to work? Dude, you're on a 7:50 a.m. train into the city in a packed car. Where do you think the rest of us are headed? A party? That last part was in my head because I'm not that bold, but really? Story 9. When I joined the army, the guy who had the infantry tattooed on him didn't even last 2 weeks in basic training. He cried and yelled, "I shouldn't have to get yelled at to do something." When I was in AIT, there was this one kid who had, "Do you know who my dad is?" syndrome, just because his dad was a drill sergeant at some other post. He used to act like a freaking prick to people at every opportunity, and several of us almost fought him, either sticking up for ourselves or other platoon members. We made it to graduation without killing him. His dad showed up and heard what an idiot he was being. Our drill sergeants called us at ease, while still in formation after the ceremony. His dad walks up to the formation, calls him up front, and makes him do push-ups in his class A's while saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. It remains to this day the most glorious thing I have ever seen. Story 10. When the high school principal's daughter, who previously got away with all kinds of garbage behavior, vandalism, drinking, major bullying, got caught vandalizing a lecture hall in uni, she was unceremoniously dumped and banned. Parents whined for months on Facebook about their poor baby's unfair treatment and the fact that her applications to other universities were being denied. These parents are exactly why crappy children turn into even crappier adults. My ex was a prime example. He was always getting in trouble, in and out of juvie or jail. Don't judge me. I was 16 and thought dating an older guy who was rough around the edges was a good idea. Obviously, I was very wrong. Every time this guy would do something terrible, his family and parents would blame it on other people or his friends, or he was having a bad day, or he's such a good-hearted person, he didn't mean it. Have you ever seen those murder shows where the victim's family and the defendant's family are at odds, and the defendant's family is saying that the victim's family is ruining their child's life because they were wrongly accused? That's exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter what they're accused of or what the evidence says. Their crazy, dysfunctional family will always stand by their side and reward and have an excuse for their terrible behavior. Story 11. Oh goody, I remembered this earlier today and was hoping I'd be able to share. Not sure if this really qualifies, but it's a good one. So this gem isn't about a child. This was a full-grown woman, maybe mid-30s, who was very clearly handed everything in life. Spoiled, selfish, entitled, whatever you want to call it. She was way out of touch with reality. So I grew up in a very nice upper-middle-class area with nothing but houses for miles around. At the center is a small block with a little grocery store, a few boutiques, restaurants, and a drugstore. It being the only shopping center anywhere around tends to attract really snobby people. Anyway, I was maybe 14 or 15 and went to the drugstore to grab something or another and happened to wander past the makeup aisle. This drugstore is pretty large, so their makeup selection is huge with every brand that you can think of, taking up one whole wall of the building. I had just rounded the corner where I saw this woman sitting on the ground just as I saw the manager coming around the opposite corner making a beeline for her like a bulldog. He stops, arms crossed, and the following happens. Him. Ma'am, I hope you know that you have to pay for those. Her. What? Him. The makeup? All of these packages you've opened? You have to pay for them. He gestured towards where I was standing, still at the end of the aisle. I looked down to my right and saw what he was pointing at. The pressed powder compacts. She had opened one of each shade ranging from ivory to warm beige, and left the remains in piles at the bottom of each display. That's right, I said each. She went through every single brand and opened the packaged compacts. And to make it worse, each brand usually makes more than one type of pressed powder. There had to be at least 40 of them. Her, agitated. What do you mean? I don't understand. Why do I have to pay for them when I only need one? Him, having a stroke. because you've destroyed them. And because you've used them. We can no longer sell these to anyone else because they've been contaminated by you. Her becoming irate. Well, I needed to test them to match my skin tone. It was at this point I realized that next to all the compacts were the used makeup sponges that come with them, as well as what appeared to be used baby wipes. Him, impending aneurysm. Well, I hope it was worth all the money you now owe us. This was about 15 years ago, so the remainder of the conversation is fuzzy. I know she was panicking and refusing to pay, and he threatened to call the cops. But I had to leave at that point, so I didn't get to see the outcome. But I do know that I did a little math when I got home. Nowadays, one of those compacts will cost about $10 each. But back then, I'd say 5 to 6, so she had to pay at least $240 at the end of that. Story 12. My ex-best friend was raised spoiled. His family wasn't very rich, but they still always tried their best to get him everything he asked for and never taught him to take responsibility for his mistakes. I'll write a list of the things he pulled after leaving school. 1. Got 3 strikes on his license and lost it by running a red light. Wasn't his fault because there weren't many cars around. Speeding through a school zone wasn't his fault because there were no kids around, even though he was going so fast that he would have been breaking the limit if the school zone limit wasn't in place. Getting pulled over and one of his passengers wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Was his fault for not wearing it. 2. Quit his job because he wanted more time to skate. Did this by going to his ex's and sleeping with her instead of going to work, and then bragging about it on Facebook. Centrelink refuses to pay him because he's not even trying to get a job, and no place will hire him because of his track record. 3. Sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl at a party. He was 21, and somehow managed to get away with that. Also, this wasn't some massive drinking party, it was a family barbecue. 4. Assaulted a bouncer at a nightclub and then assaulted the police who tried to arrest him. Spent a week in jail for that. 5. Moved to Melbourne, then Sydney, and ended up being homeless for a couple of years and is currently homeless in Germany. Story 13. I was out at a farm with my cousins for a party. It was more like an afternoon barbecue with all the parents sitting and talking and cooking while the kids ran around playing. Usually a lazy afternoon in Africa. So anyway, I was 16 at the time, making me the oldest of the kids, and I will admit that I was all back of the bus, too cool for school type of cringy teenager and was practicing my casual aloofness. Now there was this German couple there with this absolute monster child, of 5, who made it his mission to terrorize all the other kids. The parents of little Adolf sat beaming with delight watching their little ray of sunshine playing with the other children. Eventually, it became apparent that they were going to do nothing about it, and my parents told me to keep my cool and just ignore him. I did because I didn't want to put my parents in an awkward situation. At some point in the afternoon, the kid found one of those plastic toddler toys, you know, the ones where they can sit on it and push themselves around, but it also has a handle on the back that the toddlers can use as a walker. So he finds this toy and is running around this lawn full speed, ramming all the other kids. Now, I did tell him nicely that it was not good to hurt the other little boys and girls, but he ignored me and carried on with his game, giggling and chasing the other kids. He also decided that I was now fair game, and I got rammed in the ankles and Achilles tendon a few times, and I'm fuming. His parents were watching and laughing the whole time. Eventually, I am done with this crap, so I position myself in front of a small ditch, only about a 1/4 inch deep and full of grass, and pull out my phone pretending to read messages. I was making myself an easy target for the little brat. He comes charging up behind me, aiming for my heels again. The front wheels go into the little ditch, stopping the walker. The kid was pushing it so fast that his momentum carried him right over the handlebars, right over the push toy, and past me. Face plants in the dirt, going full scorpion. There was no blood, but he lay there and screamed blue murder. The best part was that the parents watched the whole thing take place, and they and the other parents never suspected that I stood in that exact spot for that exact reason. His parents were kind of pissed that the kid hurt himself while I was watching the kids, but they couldn't say anything, so they just kept the boy close for the rest of the day. Story 14. I will admit that I was a bit spoiled growing up, though I didn't think I was a brat. My mom had a maid that came in several times a week. When I went to college, several things were very different for me. I knew to clean up after myself, but cleaning a bathroom was completely new. The biggest shock was laundry. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or how. I knew I was supposed to use detergent and softener, but I thought any soap would do and didn't know what softener was. I had no idea how or when to add them either. Really hit when a campus security guard came in and I asked how much of the dish soap I was supposed to use, and the man started laughing. He did help me get the right soap after and explained how to operate a washer and dryer. If it makes you feel better, laundry is one of the most common hurdles for 18-year-olds first out on their own, regardless of upbringing. In Army basic training, those of us who were a couple of years older spent that first Sunday laundry day teaching probably around half the company how to use the machines. That's hilarious and adorable. I'm glad he could help you. The first time I did laundry alone when the washer stopped, as it did for a minute between rinse and spin cycles, I took all the laundry out, wrung the water from it, and threw it in the dryer. I wanted to surprise my grandma by helping her. She saw what I did and laughed and showed me the correct way. Let the washer spin the water out, then the dryer. Oops. You learned, I learned, we became adults. It's our turn to teach people how to use a washer. I know too many people who struggle with daily household chores. It's because of this that I am teaching my kid how to do these things. He is 3 and can work the washing machine and dryer, wash windows, put dishes away, sweep and put his clothes in his dresser. All of this is supervised and guided, but he knows what's what. He also loves helping me cook and bake and can damn near make pancakes all by himself, minus the cooking part. I refuse to raise a child who can't take care of himself. Story 15. My friend has this entitled younger brother who acts like this world revolves around him. While his dad is stern with him, his mom babies this behavior and he can get away scot-free with almost anything. He gets angry very easily, and even at the slightest things. I was over at my friend's house, and while we were downstairs, we heard a loud crash from his brother's room. It turns out he was playing Fortnite on his TV and threw the controller into the glass table, which shattered. My friend called me later in the day over Discord and told me how after his dad came back, he grounded his brother for a month, and he wasn't allowed to play video games or go over to a friend's house. He had to pay for a new table with his allowance and had to do chores. He got what he deserved. Story 16. When I was in high school, there was this terribly bratty rich kid who loved to pick on others, push people around, and play the "do you know who my dad is" card a lot. Let's call him Todd. I hated this kid, all through school. In the final year of high school, I had a bad day one day and it obviously showed. Todd sees me walking in the hall and makes a snide remark about my shirt. I promptly tell him to shove it, as I am not in the mood. He walks over to me while I am at my locker, slams my locker door, and shoves me. I recall that he had said something else, but I honestly don't remember what it was. I just remember that I saw red, and drove my fist into his nose like a truck. I stomped away all teenage and angsty. Got called to the office the next day. Todd is sitting there with his father and the principal. I knew I was screwed. The principal shows us all the security camera footage of what went down. I'm assuming an expulsion is coming my way when Todd's father puts his hand on my shoulder and smiles. He tells Todd to say thank you, and we both look at him dumbfounded. "Why would I thank him? He broke my nose," says Todd. His father responds with, "Because if I had been there and seen you act like that, I'd have killed you." He stood up and left, and I was excused to return to class. Todd never bothered me again. Story 17. I worked with a girl who was completely entitled to everything. She was a pretty blonde girl who was reaching her 40s and not so pretty anymore. She was impossible to be around and talk to. She was always right, had no clue how the real world worked, and always made excuses. I treated her like anyone else I worked with and would not do her work for her. She went to our boss weekly because I was treating her unfairly, because I refused to do her work after I got mine done, while she painted her nails and made personal phone calls. She was furious when I was promoted over her. Then we hit the recession of 2008 and I was laid off. She got my job and quit within 3 weeks because she could not handle the pressure. I wonder where she is now, and if she's going to go through the bar circuit of trying to find some loser to pay her rent for the month. She bragged about doing this and was pissed when a month came around where she had to pay her own rent. Story 18. When it hit me. I grew up in a very financially stable, loving household. My parents aimed to raise me to be smart with my money since that's pretty much the main way they built such a good life for themselves. And I took it completely for granted. Never had to hold down a job since they would still provide for me all of the necessities. Never worried about being more frugal, shopping store brands even though my mom did, thinking about wants versus needs, etc. I was stupid. I was spoiled because my parents weren't very hard on me because of my crippling anxiety and depression. I was a brat because I looked down on poor people, like, wow, you really can't afford gas? Save your money, dumbass. Then I moved out when I was 20 and I had to get a job to pay for stuff, and much to my dismay, I couldn't just quit when it got boring or difficult. I had to become more frugal, and I was humbled every time my boyfriend covered my share of bills when I didn't have enough money despite trying my best to save. He grew up way smarter about money than I did, that's for sure. I've definitely become stronger and smarter, but I owe an apology to less fortunate friends I had growing up who would probably be thrilled to know that the real world has finally hit me. I had a very similar upbringing, although I had a job since I was 15 but spent all of my money on pointless stuff. I was given a car, but didn't take care of it, and nothing was really expected of me when I was growing up. I also had crippling depression and anxiety since I was 18. When I was 20, I also moved out into a one-bedroom in Chicago. I moved out with a job, had some money saved up, but only enough for like 2 months of rent. I didn't know how to cook, clean, hell, I didn't even know where anything was in the supermarket. I found a restaurant job down the street that I felt too good for and quit almost immediately. I still feel really bad about that, but I hope they forgot about me. I ended up finding a roommate, getting creative with the apartment and finding a job that I felt was good enough for me. Doggy daycare of all things. That first year was wild. The car died because I didn't take care of it, so I gave it back. I'm terrible. To my parents. I figured out how to navigate the city by bike. I got better at cooking. I was still a massive piece of work even after a few years, but I was open to try any experience that would make me a better person, because I did not like the spoiled brat that I was. I took on having a lot of roommates and weird jobs and tried to travel as much as I could. I still have a really difficult time with anxiety, especially in social situations, and I can still be a brat with my boyfriend. I was also just thinking about how crappy I was to my friends in high school. I genuinely had no idea how spoiled, stubborn, and kind of mean I was. I have so much regret for that version of myself, although I try not to let it bring me down. I was just a product of my environment at the time. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.